My daughter-in-law stole $5 million of my late son's inheritance and shouted in my face, "I wish you good begging, you old fool." She thought I was a helpless pensioner, but I called my lawyer, canceled her luxury villa, sold her Mercedes, and ruined her life forever. And when she called me 210 times, crying and begging for mercy, justice was just beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The door opened before I could knock. Jessica stood there, hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that cost more than my monthly pension. Behind her, I heard the buzz of power tools and men's voices calling measurements. The scent of fresh paint hit me like a wave. "Harold?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This isn't a good time." I held up the envelope. "I brought something to help with expenses." That morning, I'd sat at my kitchen table on SW 12th Street and written out a check for $50,000, nearly a third of my liquid savings. Brandon would have wanted me to take care of Jessica during this difficult transition. I'd imagined her struggling with funeral costs, mortgage payments, the endless bills that death leaves behind. The drive through Little Havana toward Coral Gables had taken 25 minutes, time I spent rehearsing words of comfort that now felt useless against her impatient stance. "Jessica, I know this has been impossibly hard. I wanted to help with expenses." "That's not necessary, Harold. I'm managing fine." "Please, Brandon was my son. Let me do this for him." She paused, something calculating crossing her features. "Fine. Come in for a minute, but I really am busy." When she reluctantly stepped aside, my eyes caught on everything at once. The kitchen had been gutted. New stainless steel appliances still had protective film on them, the kind of sub-zero refrigerator I'd seen in magazines at the doctor's office. Two workers in paint-splattered overalls were laying intricate tile in what used to be a simple hallway. Through the living room doorway, I spotted furniture tags from Restoration Hardware, hanging off an oversized leather sofa. "You're doing some updates?" "Just things Brandon and I had planned. Might as well keep busy, right? Keeps my mind off everything." "This must be expensive timing." Her tone sharpened like a blade. "I can afford it, Harold. Brandon provided well." I made mental notes of everything. The model numbers on appliances, the contractor's company name visible on a work order taped to the wall, the way Jessica's hands trembled slightly when I handed her the check, despite her cold demeanor. Old habits from 40 years navigating ships. Observe conditions, note anomalies, adjust course accordingly. Jessica took the check from my hand, glanced at the amount, and folded it once before slipping it into her pocket. No ceremony. No gratitude beyond words. "Thanks, Harold. That's helpful." No hug, no tears. Just a quick nod like I'd delivered a pizza. She checked her phone, tapped something, then looked past me toward the door. "I'm actually in the middle of contractor meetings, so 50,000. It should cover funeral costs and give you breathing room for a few months." She barely looked at the check in her pocket. "Right, thanks." "You don't need to thank me. Family takes care of family." "Of course." She positioned herself between me and the living room the entire time, angling her body like a barrier. When I tried to step further inside to see the work being done, she moved with me, maintaining that human wall. Her eyes kept darting to her phone, to the workers, to the door, anywhere but my face. "The kitchen looks expensive," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Jessica's laugh came out too sharp. "Wrong. Brandon always wanted me to have nice things. He'd have wanted this. Past tense already. Like he'd been dead for years instead of weeks." She touched the new countertop, marble, probably Italian, like she was claiming territory. I stood there, surrounded by the smell of new money being spent, and my mind went back 20 years. Brandon at 18. Acceptance letter to University of Miami in his shaking hands. Me writing tuition checks semester after semester because his mother couldn't help. Brandon at 28, desperate for his first house. Me co-signing the loan and covering the down payment when the bank wanted more proof of income. Brandon calling every Sunday. "Dad, you want to come watch Nicole? Jessica has errands." Always there. Always helping. Always the one he turned to when life got complicated. "I really do need to get back to the contractors. They're on the clock." "I understand. Maybe I could come by this weekend. See Nicole?" "Nicole's busy. School, activities. I'll let you know." The wall between us felt physical now, solid as the new marble. You'll call if you need anything? Sure, I'll call. She was already opening the door, one hand on the frame like she might close it whether I'd fully exited or not. I didn't argue, didn't question, didn't push. I'd learned patience on the ocean. Sometimes you wait for the storm to show its true direction before you change course. Brandon loved you very much. She paused, something flickering in her eyes that might have been genuine emotion. I know he did. He'd want you taken care of. And I am. Thanks for stopping by, Harold. I walked back to my old Toyota Camry parked between a BMW and a Lexus on her street. The workers' truck had Elite Renovations Miami painted on the side. I'd seen their ads, knew they weren't cheap. Inside my car, I sat for a full minute, engine off, staring at that house. Brandon had been gone exactly 32 days. Jessica was remodeling like she'd won the lottery. Something fundamental was wrong with this picture, but I couldn't see the whole frame yet. I pulled out my phone and typed notes into the memo app. Sub-Zero fridge, 12,000 minimum. Restoration hardware sofa, 8,000 plus. Italian tile, $50 per square foot installed. Elite Renovations, high-end contractor, probably $100,000 project minimum. My $50,000 suddenly felt like a drop in an ocean I didn't understand yet. The engine turned over and I eased into traffic, watching Jessica's house recede in my rearview mirror. She stood in the doorway, phone already pressed to her ear, talking to someone with animated gestures. Then she went inside and the door closed with a finality that felt like a verdict. The envelope from Wells Fargo sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake. Official, heavy stock paper. The kind of correspondence that changes everything. I'd been home from Jessica's house for 3 days, that uneasy feeling still churning in my gut when this arrived. I opened it with my coffee going cold beside me. Account number ending in 4792 has been closed, effective immediately. All assets have been transferred per beneficiary designation and last will and testament. For questions regarding estate distribution, please contact our Estate Services Division. My hands started shaking. That was Brandon's account. Our joint account. I dialed the estate services number with fingers that wouldn't stay steady. The representative, a woman named Patricia with a practiced sympathy voice, explained everything in careful banker language. Mr. Morrison, according to the last will and testament of Brandon Christopher Morrison, executed January 12th of this year and notarized by Linda Vasquez, all assets transferred to his spouse, Jessica Ann Morrison. The total estate value processed was $5.2 million. $5 million. My son had been worth $5 million, and I hadn't known the number until he was gone. There must be a mistake. We had a different will. 4 years ago, Brandon set up a 60-40 split. I was supposed to receive 40%. I understand, sir, but the most recent will supersedes any previous documents. The January will is properly executed and notarized. All legal requirements have been met. 4 years ago, Brandon and I had sat in a Starbucks on Brickell Avenue, discussing mortality like it was abstract. He'd just bought life insurance, $2.8 million policy because Jessica wanted security. Dad, obviously everything goes to Jess first, but I'm setting it up 60-40. She gets the majority, you get 40%. You raised me alone, paid for everything. This is your insurance too. We'd shaken hands. He'd shown me the document, signed and official. That will existed. So how did this new one? I spent an hour after the phone call building my case like I used to plot navigation charts. Every document arranged chronologically, every email printed with headers showing dates and sender information. I even called Brandon's old insurance agent, confirmed the policy existed, and that Jessica was indeed the primary beneficiary, but that didn't explain the will change. The agent hadn't heard about a new will. I printed every email exchange with Brandon about finances, found the copy of the original will he'd sent me as a PDF back in 2021, gathered bank statements showing my name on the joint account, stuffed it all in a manila folder. The drive to Coral Gables that afternoon felt different than 3 days ago. No mercy mission this time. My jaw was set, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The neighborhoods got progressively wealthier as I drove, modest homes giving way to mansions, my anger building with each mile. Her driveway stopped me cold. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class sat there gleaming in the Miami sun, dealer plates still on it, that new car perfection that costs over $100,000. As I pulled up behind it, Jessica emerged from the car, Neiman Marcus bags in both hands, hair freshly styled in that expensive way that whispers a salon, not home job. She saw me and her face did something complicated. Surprise, then annoyance, then a hardness I'd never seen before. She walked toward me like she owned the world, which in a way she now did. Those shopping bags probably contained $5,000 of clothes and accessories. She didn't hurry, didn't look concerned. Why would she? She had all the money and apparently thought I was powerless. Jessica, I received a letter from Wells Fargo. They closed Brandon's account. That's correct. Estate settlement. Standard procedure. They said you're the sole beneficiary. $5 million. Her pause lasted just a beat too long. Also correct. Brandon left everything to me. That's not what the will said 4 years ago. We discussed it. I was supposed to get 40%. People change their minds, Harold. Brandon made a new will in January. January? He never told me. We talked every week. Why would he tell you? It was his decision, his money. Inside her renovated home, surrounded by the money she'd somehow acquired, I spread the papers across her kitchen island systematically. Original will, 60-40, split. Bank statements. My name as joint account holder. The letter, assets transferred entirely to her. Explain this, I said, keeping my voice level. She glanced down, shrugged. Brandon made a new will, his choice. My name on it now. His money, I'm his father. I raised him alone from age 6. I paid for his education, his first home. She cut me off like I was a stranger bothering her. And he appreciated it, but he didn't owe you anything for being his parent. That was your job. When I pressed about the January date, about why Brandon never mentioned it, Jessica actually stepped closer to me, using her height and proximity like a weapon. You think you can challenge me? You think your questions matter? The bank has all the legal documents. You have nothing. She pointed to her door. Time for you to leave. I'm going to call my lawyer. Something isn't right here. Her laugh was glass-breaking. Your lawyer? You mean the guy you can afford on a captain's pension? I have resources. You have nothing, Harold. Brandon told me about your finances. Living in that tiny house in Little Havana, driving a 15-year-old car. You're barely scraping by. That's not... Her voice rose, unleashing something cruel I'd never witnessed before. I wish you happy begging, you old fool. Go ahead, call a lawyer. You can't even afford a good one. The mask came completely off, and underneath was someone I'd never met. Someone who saw me as an obstacle, not family. You can't just steal from me. Steal? I stole nothing. My name is on the will. My name is on the bank accounts now. My name is on the title of this house. Everything is legal. Brandon wouldn't have done this. Brandon did do this. Because he loved me? Because I was with him for 12 years, not you. You were just the old man who showed up for holidays. That's not true. She moved toward me, hands gesturing dismissal. Get out of my house. I stood my ground. This isn't over. Oh, it's over. You lost. Old men always lose. You think your captain's pension will help you fight me in court? By the time you save up for an attorney, the statute of limitations will have passed. As she physically guided me toward the door, her hand on my shoulder like I was a child being dismissed, I looked around one more time. New artwork on walls. Designer furniture. Through the window, a pool cleaning service van parked outside. Every detail locked into my memory. At the door, I kept my voice calm. You made a mistake, Jessica. The only mistake was letting you in. Don't come back. The door slammed behind me, hard enough to rattle the frame. I walked to my Toyota, climbed inside, sat there for a moment while rage and calculation fought for control. Then something shifted. The grief-stricken father evaporated, replaced by something older, colder, something that had commanded ships through storms and knew how to wait, how to plan, how to strike when the moment was exactly right. Jessica thought she'd dismissed a powerless old man. She thought I'd crawl away defeated. She had no idea what she'd just awakened. I started the engine, pulled away from her mansion, and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. A small smile crossed my face, the kind I used to wear when I'd spotted a navigation error that everyone else had missed. She'd underestimated the old sea-wolf. That was her first and fatal mistake. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Jessica's words kept replaying like a broken record. You old fool! You can't afford a lawyer. You have nothing. By sunrise, I was sitting at my kitchen table with coffee and a phone number I hadn't called in 2 years. Raymond Foster. We'd sailed together in the 70s, young men navigating the Caribbean on cargo ships, before he traded the ocean for law school. Now he was one of Miami's top estate attorneys. If anyone could help me, it was Raymond. I dialed at 8 sharp. Raymond answered on the second ring, his voice still carrying that slight Bronx accent he'd never lost, despite 40 years in Florida. Raymond, it's Harold Morrison. I need help. Harold? Been too long, old friend. What's happening? My son Brandon died in a car accident last month. His wife stole his entire inheritance. $5 million? The silence lasted exactly 10 seconds. Stole? That's a strong word. She forged a will. I need you to prove it. Get to my office, right now. We'll handle this. I was already grabbing my keys. His office was in downtown Miami. 30 minutes if traffic cooperated, and I made it in 25. The elevator opened on the 12th floor to glass doors etched with Foster & Associates Law Firm in elegant lettering. Raymond met me in reception himself, 72 years old now, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly pension. He led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. I spread both wills across the mahogany table, the original from 2021 that Brandon had sent me, and the bank's copy of the alleged new will. Walk me through the timeline. When did Brandon create the original will? 4 years ago, 2021. We discussed it at length, 60% to Jessica, 40% to me. And this new will claims he changed it to 100% for her? Supposedly in January. But Brandon never mentioned it. We talked every week. Raymond pulled reading glasses from his pocket and examined both documents with the intensity of a surgeon. His finger stopped on a name. Linda Vasquez, Notary Public. He pulled his laptop closer, typed rapidly into what looked like a Florida state database. His eyebrows went up. Harold, this woman lost her notary license on December 18th, 2024, revoked permanently for falsifying documents on 2 separate real estate transactions. He turned the screen toward me. Official state record. Revocation date clear as day. The will in front of us is dated January 12th, 2025, nearly a month after she lost the right to notarize anything. How is this possible? How did the bank accept an invalid will? Banks verify notary signatures, but they don't always check active license status in real time. They assume good faith. Jessica exploited that gap. So we can prove this is fraudulent? Raymond leaned back, fingers steepled like he was addressing a jury. Absolutely. Florida probate fraud statutes are explicit. Forging a will is a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and $10,000 fine. This isn't a civil dispute about who gets what. This is criminal fraud. Your daughter-in-law didn't just take money that wasn't hers. She committed a crime. He paused, studying me. And if we can prove she knew the notary was invalid, which I suspect we can, the penalties get much worse. Sitting there in that expensive office, looking at proof that my son's last wishes had been violated, something broke loose in my chest. The tears came before I could stop them. Memories hit like waves. Brandon at 6, after his mother left, asking if I still loved him. Brandon at 16 on a fishing boat in the Keys, telling me about his first crush. Brandon at 33, a year before he died, hugging me at Nicole's birthday party and whispering, "Dad, you're the best person I know. I want to be like you." Raymond quietly pushed a box of tissues across the table. I took 2, wiped my face, and straightened my shoulders. "Enough," I said, more to myself than to him. "Brandon deserves justice, not my tears. What do we do next?" "We need to prove intent. That means tracking where the money went, who Jessica associates with, whether there are co-conspirators." "How do we do that?" Raymond made a call without asking my permission first. That's how good old friends operate. "Warren Ray Foster, I need financial surveillance on a probate fraud case. Subject is female, 38, Coral Gables resident. Recently came into $5 million. I need spending patterns, associates, Anything that shows intent or conspiracy. He listened, nodded. Client's budget is flexible. This is personal. When he hung up, he looked at me. Warren Cruz, best private investigator in Miami. His rate is $250 per hour. He's expensive because he's worth it. He'll start today. I can afford it. I'm taking this case pro bono on the legal side. Old friends don't charge old friends. You just cover the PI costs. I drove back to Little Havana with my mind spinning through possibilities. Albert Hayes lived 3 houses down from me. A widower like me spent most mornings on his porch with the newspaper and Cuban coffee. I'd known him 15 years, but only as a friendly neighbor who sometimes borrowed my hedge trimmer. Today I needed to know him better. I walked down the sidewalk and up his steps. He looked up from the Miami Herald, surprised. Harold? You look like you've been through it. Coffee? We sat on his porch while I explained everything. Brandon's death, the inheritance, Jessica's fraud. Albert listened without interrupting, but his expression changed when I mentioned the $5 million. You're telling me she received $5 million in estate assets? According to the bank, yes. Life insurance, savings, investments. And she's already spent how much? Hundreds of thousands, maybe $1 million. Renovations, car, furniture, shopping. Albert set down his coffee cup carefully. Harold, I worked for the IRS for 30 years. Estate tax is 40% on anything over the federal exemption. If she received $5 million, she owes $2 million in taxes. Filing deadline was probably 9 months after death. Did she file? I had no idea. Albert smiled grimly. I'm betting she didn't. Want me to check? You can do that. I still have access to certain databases. Professional courtesy for retired agents. Give me a few days. Harold, she's committing tax fraud on top of will fraud. Federal estate tax is 40%. She owes $2 million to the IRS, and I guarantee she hasn't filed. She probably doesn't even know she's supposed to. What happens when the IRS finds out? His grin turned predatory. They'll eat her alive. Liens, penalties, criminal referral if it's bad enough. The IRS doesn't forgive, and they never forget. I sat there on Albert's porch, watching the street, feeling something I hadn't felt since Jessica's door slammed in my face. Not alone. Raymond on the legal front, Warren on surveillance, Albert on taxes. The team was assembling. Jessica thought she'd dismissed a powerless old man. She had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks of waiting felt like 2 years. I kept myself busy, walked the neighborhood more than usual, reorganized my garage twice, cooked elaborate meals I barely tasted. Raymond checked in every few days. Warren's working. Be patient. Albert pulled tax records and muttered about missing forms. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Warren Cruz. Mr. Morrison, I have results. You're going to want to see these in person. I drove to his office in Coconut Grove within the hour. Warren Cruz operated out of a small office above a coffee shop, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Inside, the space was organized chaos. Filing cabinets, computer monitors, camera equipment on every surface. Warren himself was 50-something, compact and precise, with the watchful eyes of someone who'd spent a career observing people who didn't want to be observed. He spread photographs across his desk like a poker player revealing a winning hand. Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming. I have comprehensive results from 2 weeks of surveillance. You said I'd want to see this in person. That sounds ominous. Ominous for your daughter-in-law, helpful for you. She's been remarkably careless. Show me everything. Let's start with the spending. Then we'll get to the really interesting parts. Warren had receipts, credit card statements, surveillance photos with timestamps. Jessica at Bal Harbor shops on 3 separate occasions in 1 week, emerging with shopping bags from Gucci, Prada, Chanel. Total damage, $47,000. Dinner at Zuma with a male companion. Not dinner for 2, but dinner for 6. Premium sake, Wagyu beef, the works. $23,000 for 1 meal. She's burning through money like it's paper, Warren said flatly. At this rate, the $5 million will be gone in 2 years. The male companion appeared in multiple photos. Warren tapped one image, Jessica and a tall, well-dressed man outside a restaurant, his hand on her lower back. Another photo, the 2 of them kissing in the parking lot of Matheson Hammock Park. Who is this man? In all these photos with Jessica? Derek Campbell, age 40, realtor, Fisher Island Realty, specializes in luxury properties. They're clearly involved, romantically. Yes, and it predates your son's death. I found social media evidence of them together 8 months ago. They were careful, but not careful enough. The words hit like a physical blow. She was cheating on Brandon while he was alive? I believe so. And Derek was a witness on the fraudulent will. This isn't coincidence. Warren pulled another document, this one showing the deed to Jessica's renovated house, not in her name. An LLC, Sunset Paradise Holdings. Why create an LLC? Why not just buy the house in her name? 2 reasons. First, it obscures the money trail, makes it harder to prove the funds came from the estate. Second, LLC ownership provides liability, protection, and can reduce property taxes. It's actually smart, from a criminal perspective. Derek set this up. Derek is the registered agent. He has experience with real estate transactions. He knew exactly what he was doing. Warren had dug deeper than just spending patterns. The LLC was created 2 weeks after Brandon's death. The villa, I couldn't call it a house anymore, was purchased for $2.3 million, with a mortgage of $1.4 million. The down payment of $900,000 came from estate funds, but because it went through the LLC first, it was harder to trace. Classic money laundering structure, Warren said. Derek knows what he's doing, or thinks he does. Then came the truly spectacular part. Warren showed me Jessica's liabilities. Casino records from Seminole Hard Rock. I didn't ask how he got them. Didn't want to know. Showing Jessica down $180,000 over the past 18 months. Credit card statements totaling $95,000 in debt across 3 major cards, all maxed out, all past due. And then the loan shark documentation. $65,000 in private loans from individuals in Hialeah, the kind of people who don't send polite reminder notices. She's not just greedy, I said slowly. She's desperate. Drowning in debt. Brandon's death was her life raft, or so she thought. I spent 2 hours in Warren's office, going through every photograph, every receipt, every document. Warren had organized everything chronologically, showing Jessica's spending acceleration. She'd been relatively modest in the first week after Brandon's death, then exploded into luxury purchases by week 2. The timeline told a story of someone who thought they'd gotten away with something. That evening I met with Raymond and Albert at Raymond's office. Albert had his own findings. She filed nothing. No federal estate tax return, no Florida estate tax return, no gift tax declarations on the LLC transfer. She owes the IRS approximately $2 million, and they don't even know she exists yet. Albert smiled like a predator. But they will. Raymond, when he saw all Warren's evidence, immediately started constructing a conspiracy timeline on his office whiteboard. Brandon's death in March, Jessica's immediate contact with Derek, the LLC formation, the fraudulent will signing with Derek as witness, the money transfers, the villa purchase. This isn't opportunistic fraud, Raymond said, marker in hand. This is premeditated. Derek helped her from day one. They planned this together. Warren's evidence is solid. We have proof of fraud, proof of conspiracy, proof of tax evasion. The IRS angle alone could destroy her. $2 million in unpaid taxes, plus penalties and interest. She'll never recover financially. What's our first move? Raymond capped his marker. We file in probate court to set aside the fraudulent will. Simultaneously, we submit criminal complaints for forgery and fraud. And Albert, you'll notify the IRS? Already drafted the letter. I'll send it anonymously, but with enough detail that they'll investigate immediately. Sitting in Raymond's office that evening, looking at the whiteboard covered with evidence of betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore, colder than that. Calculation. Jessica's greed had made her stupid. Derek's incompetence had left a trail a blind person could follow. They'd committed multiple felonies, evaded taxes, and documented their crimes with credit card receipts and social media posts. Harold, this is going to get ugly. Jessica will fight back. Are you prepared for that? She called me an old fool, said I couldn't afford a lawyer, said I'd die begging. And now? Now she's about to learn that old doesn't mean powerless. She and Derek made every mistake possible. Their greed made them sloppy. Their arrogance made them careless. Albert nodded. They walked into a trap they built themselves. I stood looking at the evidence board, photographs, receipts, legal documents, tax forms, everything we needed to dismantle Jessica's stolen empire. Time to strike the first blow, I said quietly, and it will be devastating. Raymond smiled. I'll start drafting the filings tonight. I left Raymond's office carrying a folder of evidence, walking out into the Miami night. The city lights sparkled across Biscayne Bay, and for the first time since Brandon died, I felt something close to peace. Jessica thought she'd won, thought she'd outsmarted everyone, thought an old captain with a modest pension couldn't touch her. She had no idea the storm that was coming. Raymond called me at dawn. It's time, Harold. I'm filing this morning. All 3 petitions simultaneously. Are you ready for what comes next? I was already dressed, coffee brewing in the kitchen, watching the sun rise over Little Havana. Ready? I'd been ready since the day Jessica slammed her door in my face. File them, I said. Let's end this. By 9 that morning, Raymond stood in Miami-Dade County Probate Court with 3 separate legal filings, each one more devastating than the last. Raymond walked into the probate clerk's office carrying 3 manila folders that would destroy Jessica's world. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Carmen who'd worked there 20 years, took one look at the emergency motion stamp and called the duty judge immediately. Judge Maria Rodriguez was in her chambers within 15 minutes, reading through the evidence Raymond had compiled, the handwriting expert's affidavit showing signature inconsistencies, the Florida State Database printout proving Linda Vasquez lost her notary license in December, and the original 2021 will with its clear 60/40 distribution. By 10:30, she'd signed the temporary restraining order with a note in the margin, prima facie evidence of fraud, assets frozen pending full hearing. Raymond's office called Wells Fargo's legal department at 11. By noon, every account connected to Brandon Morrison's estate was flagged in the system. Jessica's checking account, savings account, the money market account where she'd parked $2.7 million, all showed the same status, frozen by court order. The bank's automated system sent her an email notification, but Jessica didn't see it. She was still asleep, having stayed up late the night before shopping online, a glass of Prosecco on her nightstand going flat in the morning light. The next morning, the Miami-Dade sheriff's deputy arrived at Jessica's villa at exactly 6:47, the earliest time allowed for civil service. He rang the doorbell 3 times before Jessica appeared, bleary-eyed, wearing a silk bathrobe that cost $800, her hair messy, makeup smeared. Jessica Morrison, I have court documents for you. He handed her the thick envelope and had her sign for receipt. She stood there on her marble-floored foyer, barefoot, reading the first page, petition to set aside fraudulent will. Her hands started shaking. By the 3rd page, criminal complaint for forgery, she was sitting on the floor, papers scattered around her, her breath coming in short gasps. Her first call was to Derek. They know. Harold's lawyer filed against me. They're calling it fraud. Your name is in here as a witness. Derek's voice on the other end was panicked, higher pitched than usual. What? How did they... Does it mention the LLC? Does it mention me specifically? He wasn't asking how to help her. He was asking how much trouble he was in. Her 2nd through 16th calls were to Harold. Everyone went straight to voicemail. She left messages that progressed from confused to angry to desperate. Harold, what is this? Harold, you can't do this. Harold, please, we need to talk. I listened to each one later, sitting in my kitchen with Albert, both of us with coffee, playing them on speakerphone. Albert shook his head. She really thought she'd gotten away with it. I'd prepared for Jessica's calls by putting my phone on Do Not Disturb, with exceptions only for Raymond, Albert, and Warren. Every call from Jessica went to voicemail automatically. I didn't block her. That would have looked defensive. I just didn't answer. Let her hear her own voice getting more desperate with each message. Let her feel what it's like to be ignored, dismissed, treated as irrelevant. I saw her car pull up through my front window, the Mercedes, still gleaming, still expensive, but now with a desperation to her parking, crooked against the curb. She ran up my walkway and pounded on the door with both fists. Harold, open up! We need to talk! You can't do this! I waited a full minute. taking a slow sip of my coffee, then walked to the door and opened it calmly. She looked terrible, still in the bathrobe, flip-flops on her feet, papers clutched in one hand. "Jessica," I said evenly, "you seem surprised." Her face went from red to white in seconds. Who helped you? You can't afford?" I smiled, just smiled. 40 years I captained ships through hurricanes, Jessica. I've seen storms that would have sunk your little scheme in seconds. You underestimated me. That was your mistake. You don't understand. I have debts. I need this money. You stole from my dead son. You disrespected his memory. You called me a beggar. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. And now you'll learn what it means to cross someone who actually has power. What are you going to do? My smile widened slightly. I already did it. Check your bank accounts. I closed the door before she could respond, locked it, and walked back to my coffee. Through the window, I watched her stand on my porch, trembling, before finally stumbling back to her car. Raymond hadn't just filed the petitions. He'd orchestrated them for maximum impact. The criminal complaint went to the state attorney's office simultaneously with the probate filings. He'd also sent courtesy copies to the IRS and Florida Department of Revenue, flagging Jessica's tax issues. By lunch, 5 different government entities knew about Jessica Morrison and her alleged fraud. Raymond had a contact at the Miami Herald, a legal affairs reporter named Sandra, who covered probate and estate cases. He'd given her a tip 3 days earlier. Big estate fraud case coming, $5 million, Coral Gables widow. Sandra had prepared the story in advance, just waiting for the filing. The article appeared online that same afternoon, in print the next morning. Small article, page B7, but damaging. Local woman accused of forging will, stealing 5 Mott's estate. Jessica's full name, her neighborhood, the basics of the allegation, enough that her neighbors would see it. By evening, Jessica had discovered her bank accounts were frozen when her credit card was declined, at a gas station. She'd tried calling Wells Fargo, spent 40 minutes on hold, only to be told accounts under court-ordered freeze, no transactions permitted. She'd tried withdrawing cash from an ATM, declined. She'd logged into her online banking, read alerts across every account. She called Derek again, hysterical now, and he told her he couldn't be seen with her, couldn't help, had to protect himself. She was alone, broke and terrified, all in the span of 12 hours. The next morning I sat on my porch with Cuban coffee, reading the Herald article while the neighborhood woke up. Albert joined me with his own cup. "That was just the first day," I said quietly, folding the newspaper. The next 3 weeks would be her financial execution. Albert nodded slowly. "The ship is taking on water. Now we watch it sink." 3 weeks after Raymond filed, I sat in the Miami-Dade County Courthouse for the preliminary hearing. Jessica sat 4 rows ahead of me with her attorney, a young guy in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd just passed the bar. Raymond had warned me. She hired Marcus Webb, charges $150 per hour. He's adequate for simple cases. This isn't simple. The judge entered. We rose, and Jessica's financial world ended in 12 minutes. Judge Rodriguez didn't waste time. "Ms. Morrison, you will return $2 million to Mr. Harold Morrison within 60 days, per the terms of the legitimate 2021 will. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties." Jessica's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client doesn't have that amount readily available. Then she'll make it available. Sell assets. Liquidate holdings. This court has found the will was fraudulent. We plan to appeal. Appeal all you want. The order stands. $2 million. 60 days. Next case." I watched Jessica's shoulders slump, watched her wipe her eyes with a tissue that was already damp. She'd been crying before we even entered the courtroom. She wore clothes I'd seen before. She was re-wearing outfits. Couldn't afford new ones. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the salon styling I'd seen 2 months ago. She'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. Her face was drawn, eyes hollow. This wasn't just financial pressure. This was complete life collapse. After the hearing, Jessica's lawyer laid out the brutal reality in the courthouse hallway. I heard about it later through Warren's continued surveillance. Bank accounts, $427,000 remaining from the original $5 million. Real estate, the Coral Gables villa worth $2.3 million, but with a $1.4 million mortgage that Derek had somehow secured without proper income verification. Wells Fargo was now demanding documentation, threatening foreclosure. Car, Mercedes S-Class on lease, $2,100 per month, already 2 months behind. Mercedes-Benz Financial Services sending final notices. Furniture and renovations, $340,000 spent, 90% financed through credit cards that were now maxed out and past due. She had maybe $500,000 in liquid and semi-liquid assets. She owed $2 million to me, plus whatever interest the court tacked on. The math didn't work. 2 days after the court hearing, Jessica received a thick envelope from the Department of Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Office of Tax Enforcement. The letter was cordial in that terrifying way only the IRS can manage. Our records indicate no estate tax return was filed for the estate of Brandon Christopher Morrison. Federal estate tax owed $2,087,450. Penalties for late filing $156,558. Interest accrued $34,528. Total amount due $2,275.96. Please remit payment within 30 days or contact our office to establish a payment plan. Albert had been right. They'd eaten her alive, and they were just getting started. Next would come the Florida Department of Revenue with their own bill. Derek, to his minimal credit, tried to help Jessica sell the villa quickly. He listed it at $2.5 million, hoping to net enough after the mortgage to give Jessica some breathing room. Within a week, he had 2 serious buyers. Then Raymond filed a mechanic's lien against the property for the $2 million Jessica owed me, plus attorney fees and court costs. Suddenly, selling became impossible. Any buyer's title search would reveal the lien, and no bank would approve a mortgage on a property with that kind of encumbrance. Derek called Raymond, tried to negotiate. Raymond's response was polite and final. The lien stays until Mr. Morrison is paid in full. Have a nice day. Derek stopped returning Jessica's calls after that. Hector arrived on a Saturday afternoon in a black Escalade with tinted windows. He was polite, almost friendly, as he stood on Jessica's doorstep explaining that his employer, he never said who, was concerned about the $65,000 loan that was now 4 months past due. "We understand you're having difficulties," Hector said, his accent thick, his smile not reaching his eyes. "But our patience has limits. We need to see good faith. Maybe $10,000 this week?" Jessica, standing in her $800 bathrobe in her $2.3 million villa, told him she didn't have $10,000. Hector's smile disappeared. "Then we have a problem, Miss Jessica. A serious problem. I'll be back next Saturday. Have something for me?" He left without saying goodbye. Jessica stood in her foyer, shaking for 20 minutes after his Escalade drove away. The 23 calls came over 5 days. First, she tried different numbers. Her cell, Derek's cell before he cut her off, even calling from the villa's landline. Then emails, formal ones, emotional ones, one that was just please in the subject line. She sent text messages at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, clearly not sleeping. Finally, a handwritten letter arrived at my house, postmarked from Coral Gables. I opened it at my kitchen table. "Dear Harold, I made terrible mistakes. I was greedy and cruel. I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I'm begging you to drop the criminal charges. I'll give you everything I have left. Please don't send me to prison. Please. Jessica." I folded it carefully and put it in the file Raymond was building. Evidence of consciousness, of guilt. Every morning I made Cuban coffee the way I'd learned in Little Havana 30 years ago. Strong, sweet. The espuma, thick and perfect. I'd sit on my porch, check my phone for Jessica's overnight messages, and read them while the neighborhood woke up. Albert would often join me, bringing his own cup, and we'd review the latest development. IRS notice, credit card company lawsuit, Mercedes repossession warning. "She's drowning," Albert said one morning. I took a sip of coffee. "Ships sink when they take on more water than they can bail. She punched holes in her own hull." Raymond didn't just defend. He attacked. When Jessica's lawyer filed a motion to reduce the $2 million judgment, Raymond filed a counter-motion to increase it with accrued interest. When Derek tried to argue he wasn't involved in the fraud, Raymond subpoenaed his bank records and real estate transaction files. Every legal avenue Jessica tried to explore, Raymond blocked. It was methodical, professional, and absolutely ruthless. Through Warren's continued surveillance, I received weekly reports of the creditors circling Jessica. American Express sued for $95,000. Chase Bank sued for $42,000. Restoration Hardware sued for $38,000 on the unpaid furniture. Each lawsuit was another nail in her coffin, another judgment that would follow her for decades. She's going to declare bankruptcy, Warren predicted. I shook my head. Bankruptcy doesn't discharge fraud judgments, or criminal penalties, or tax debt. She's trapped. 3 weeks. The empire I watched her build with stolen money took 3 weeks to crumble. Every morning brought a new disaster for Jessica. Another creditor, another legal filing, another door closing. I sat on my porch that late July morning, coffee in hand, reading Jessica's latest desperate message. The sun was warm, the neighborhood quiet, and somewhere across Miami, Jessica Morrison was learning what it meant to steal from someone who understood patience. But Jessica and Derek weren't done fighting. They were about to make their worst mistake yet. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. Raymond's voice was amused when he reached me. "Harold, you're not going to believe this. Jessica and Derek just filed a countersuit. Against you. Against me. They're claiming we're the criminals." I set down my coffee. "What?" "Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Defamation. Elder abuse. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." I smiled. "Let them try." Raymond explained it to me in detail over the phone, reading sections aloud with barely suppressed laughter. Jessica and Derek had hired Thomas Bradley, a personal injury lawyer who normally handled slip and fall cases, charging $400 per hour with money borrowed from Derek's mother. The suit claimed I was harassing and persecuting Jessica, that the Herald article constituted defamation orchestrated by me, and that Raymond was taking advantage of my diminished capacity as an elderly man for financial gain. "It's desperate," Raymond said, "but desperate people file desperate lawsuits. They're hoping to create enough smoke that someone thinks there's fire." "When's the hearing?" 2 weeks, mid-August. Same judge, Rodriguez. She's going to tear them apart." The courtroom was the same one where Judge Rodriguez had ruled against Jessica 3 weeks earlier. This time, Jessica and Derek sat together at the plaintiff's table with Thomas Bradley between them, all three looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Derek wore an expensive suit that hung wrong on him, too much cologne, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. Jessica had aged another 10 years. Her hair needed touching up at the roots. Her clothes were off the rack instead of designer. Judge Rodriguez entered, and I could see from her expression she'd read the filing and was not impressed. Raymond stood with the easy confidence of someone holding a royal flush. 20 minutes. That's how long it took Raymond to dismantle their entire case. For the emotional distress claim, he showed that I had merely exercised legal rights to contest a fraudulent will, protected activity. For defamation, he proved every statement in the Herald article was factually accurate and based on public court records. For the elder abuse claim against himself, he produced letters of recommendation from the Florida bar, testimony from other clients, and his 42 years of spotless practice. Then he went on offense. He presented the handwriting analysis proving the will was forged, bank records showing Jessica's spending spree, credit reports showing her debts, and the photographs, Derek and Jessica together in December, 2 months before Brandon died, kissing outside a restaurant in Coconut Grove, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. The judge didn't even wait for Bradley to respond. "Ms. Morrison, in 18 years on the bench, this is the most frivolous, bad-faith filing I've encountered. You forged a will. You stole from your dead husband's father. You spent the money on your lover." She looked at Derek. "Mr. Campbell, you helped her do it, and now you have the audacity to claim Mr. Morrison is the wrongdoer." She turned to the court reporter. "Motion dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiffs are jointly and severally liable for a $15,000 sanction for frivolous litigation, payable to Mr. Morrison within 30 days. Mr. Foster, draft the order." Jessica Stark crying right there. Loud sobs that echoed in the quiet courtroom. Derek stared at the table, face bright red. Raymond gathered his papers calmly. I sat in the gallery, watching justice work. The Herald article the next day was worse than the first one. Front page of the Metro section this time, with details pulled from the court hearing. Coral Gables woman's fraud, scheme exposed. Forged will, secret lover, millions gone. It named Derek explicitly, described his role as witness on the fraudulent will, mentioned his relationship with Jessica while Brandon was alive. By afternoon, Derek's boss at Fisher Island Realty called him into the office. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. "We can't have an employee associated with fraud. You're terminated. Clear your desk." Derek called Jessica immediately, and Warren, still on surveillance, recorded the call. Derek screaming, "This is all your fault. You ruined my life. My career is over. My name is in the paper." Jessica trying to respond. Derek cutting her off. "I'm done with you. Done. Don't call me again." Then silence. He'd blocked her number. She was completely alone. I bought 3 copies of the Herald the next morning, one to keep, one for Raymond, one for Albert. I read the article on my porch with my usual Cuban coffee, marking the best passages with a pen. The photo they'd used was from Jessica's social media, her in designer clothes, smiling at some charity gala from a year ago, the image of wealthy society woman. The contrast with the fraud allegations made it more damning. Raymond had organized everything in labeled folders during the hearing, each claim getting its own binder. When Judge Rodriguez asked him to respond to the suit, he methodically worked through each accusation with supporting documents projected on the courtroom screen. The forged notary seal, enlarged so everyone could see the signature of Linda Vasquez. The database screenshot showing her license revoked December 2024. The photographs of Derek and Jessica from December, time-stamped and geotagged. The credit card statements showing purchases at jewelry stores, expensive restaurants, boutique hotels. Every piece of evidence was devastating. Jessica's lawyer tried to object twice. Both times the judge waved him off. When Judge Rodriguez announced the dismissal and $15,000 sanction, Jessica's carefully maintained composure shattered. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, not quiet tears but full-body crying that made her shoulders shake. Derek looked straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to acknowledge her. Their lawyer, Thomas Bradley, packed his briefcase quickly, clearly wanting to escape. I sat perfectly still, my face neutral, but inside I felt that cold satisfaction of watching checkmate play out. I texted the article link to Raymond the next morning. "Well done." His response came immediately. "She did this to herself. We just documented it." Albert joined me on my porch that afternoon, reading his own copy of the paper. "Justice has long arms," he said quietly. I took a sip of coffee, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. But it always reaches its target? Jessica's world ended one piece at a time. First piece, the Mercedes. I wasn't there when it happened, but Warren was. He called me that August morning, trying not to laugh. "Harold, you need to hear this. Mercedes-Benz Financial Services just showed up at Jessica's villa with a tow truck. She's outside in her pajamas, screaming at them. Neighbors are watching. Someone's filming on their phone." I pictured it, the expensive car being hooked up, dragged away, Jessica powerless to stop it. "Good," I said. Let it all fall. Warren sent me photos throughout the morning. Jessica's Mercedes on a flatbed tow truck, Jessica herself in pink pajama pants and an old t-shirt, barefoot on her driveway, arguing with 2 men in Mercedes-Benz Financial Services uniforms. Behind her I could see faces in windows, neighbors watching. One photo showed a woman across the street, openly filming with her phone. Jessica's face was red, her hair uncombed, one hand pointing at the men, the other clutching papers that were probably the final repossession notice. The men were professional, calm, unmoved by her protests. Within 20 minutes, the car was gone, leaving an oil stain on her driveway where it used to sit. The house suddenly looked emptier, like it had lost a tooth. 5 days later, the Wells Fargo envelope arrived. Notice of default. Warren got a photo of Jessica opening it on her front porch, her face draining of color as she read. The villa had a mortgage of $1.4 million. She owed me $2 million plus the $15,000 court sanction. The IRS wanted $2.1 million in taxes. Even if she sold the villa for its full $2.3 million value, unlikely in a foreclosure situation, the math was simple and brutal. She'd still be over $1 million in debt. Wells Fargo gave her 90 days to vacate or cure the default. She had $400,000 in liquid assets. It wasn't close to enough. The federal tax lien arrived via certified mail, requiring signature. The IRS didn't mess around. Every asset connected to Jessica Morrison was now encumbered. The villa, obviously, but also the furniture, the jewelry, the artwork, even her clothes, if they were expensive enough. The lien notice explained in careful bureaucratic language that attempting to sell, transfer, or hide any assets would constitute federal tax evasion, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. Jessica was trapped. Warren documented the move. Jessica loaded boxes into a U-Haul van she'd rented herself. No movers, no help, just her struggling with furniture in the August heat. The new place was a one-bedroom apartment in Hialeah, a working-class neighborhood northwest of Miami. Rent was $1,400 a month, a fraction of what the villa mortgage had been, but it might as well have been on a different planet. The building was older, paint peeling in places, parking lot cracked and weedy. Her new neighbors were working families, people who lived paycheck to paycheck. Jessica had gone from country club lunches to catching the bus at the corner. Warren's final photo of the moving day showed her sitting on the apartment steps at dusk, alone, face in her hands, surrounded by boxes she still needed to unpack. Through Warren's surveillance, I saw her trying to maintain appearances even as everything crumbled. She'd changed clothes after the repossession before walking to the neighborhood coffee shop, put on makeup, tried to look normal. But the neighbors knew. News traveled fast in Coral Gables. By afternoon, the neighborhood gossip chain had spread the story. Jessica Morrison's car was repossessed. She's broke. The fraud case in the paper was about her. Her former friends from book club, tennis group, charity boards, when she called them, they stopped answering. One woman caught on Warren's camera literally crossed the street to avoid talking to Jessica. Social death in real time. I chose Versailles Restaurant deliberately. Cuban food in Little Havana, the kind of place that felt like home, not pretentious or expensive. Nicole arrived looking so much like Brandon it hurt. Same eyes, same way of moving. She was 35 now, teaching elementary school in Coral Gables, and she hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. We ordered Cuban coffee and croquetas, and she started talking. Grandpa, I need to tell you things about Jessica, about Dad. The story came out in pieces. How Jessica had gradually cut Nicole out of Brandon's life over the past 2 years, claiming I was a bad influence, that Nicole upset Brandon by asking for money, that family visits were stressful. Lies, all lies, designed to isolate Brandon from everyone who really loved him. Then Nicole told me what Brandon had said to her 3 weeks before he died, at Nicole's birthday dinner. If something ever happens to me, promise you'll make sure Grandpa Harold gets everything he's supposed to. He's the most important person in my life. Make sure he knows that. She cried 3 times during our lunch. First when I hugged her and she smelled my cologne, apparently the same brand Brandon had used. Second, when she talked about Jessica banning her from visiting her father. Third, when she repeated Brandon's last words about me. I let her cry, didn't rush her, just held her hand across the table and passed napkins when needed. Did you know Jessica banned me from visiting Dad for the last 2 years? I suspected. You stopped coming to family dinners. She told Dad I was always asking for money, that I was stressful to be around. None of it was true. She was isolating him, cutting him off from everyone who might question her. And now she's lost everything. The house, the car, Derek. I saw the Herald articles. Justice isn't always gentle, Cario, but it's necessary. Hearing Nicole confirm what I'd suspected, that Brandon still loved me, still valued me, even at the end, settled something in my chest that had been tight since his death. Jessica had tried to paint me as irrelevant, as a burden Brandon tolerated, out of obligation, but Brandon had told Nicole the truth. I was important. I mattered. The fight I was waging wasn't just about money or justice. It was about honoring what Brandon wanted, what he'd planned for, what he'd have demanded if he'd lived to see Jessica's betrayal. I wasn't being cruel. I was being his voice. We hugged goodbye outside Versailles in the late afternoon sun, and she promised to visit again soon. Driving home, I thought about Brandon's words to Nicole, about Jessica's complete collapse, about justice taking its slow, methodical course. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Jessica was about to learn the final truth. My phone started ringing on the first day of September. Jessica's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 10 minutes later. Voicemail. Again at noon. Again at 2. Again at 5. By bedtime, she'd called 14 times. Raymond called me that evening. Harold, I'm tracking her attempts to contact you. Document everything. It shows consciousness of guilt. How many today? I asked. 14? And she's just getting started. He was right. By the end of the week, the count would reach 210. 210 calls. Raymond counted them all, kept a spreadsheet with timestamps. Day 1, 14 calls. Day 2, 23. By day 5, Jessica was calling every 20 minutes from the moment she woke until midnight. I listened to some of the voicemails. They started coherent, progressed to desperate, ended with pure anguish. Harold, please answer. I need to talk to you. Harold, I know I was terrible. I'm so sorry. Harold, I'm begging you. Please call me back. Harold, I don't know what to do. I'm losing everything. Please. The last voicemail on day 6 was 3 minutes of crying so hard she could barely form words. I sat at my kitchen table, playing it on speaker while drinking coffee, feeling nothing but cold certainty that this was exactly what justice looked like. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon in early September, took the bus from Hialeah to Little Havana, a journey that probably took an hour with transfers. I watched from my window as she walked up my street, looking diminished somehow, like she'd physically shrunk. She wore clothes I'd never seen before, old jeans, a faded t-shirt, sneakers with worn soles, no makeup, hair pulled back messily. When she reached my door, she knocked, then knocked harder, then pounded with both fists. Harold, please, I know you're home. I need to talk to you. She kept it up for 10 minutes, 20, an hour. Albert came out of his house, gave me a questioning look through my window. I shook my head, let her knock. After 2 hours, Mrs. Garcia from next door called out, Miss, he's not answering. Maybe come back another time. Jessica slid down to sit on my porch steps, head in her hands. That's when I decided to open the door. I looked down at her. She scrambled to her feet. Mascara tracks down her face, even though she wasn't wearing makeup. Old tears, I realized, from earlier crying that she'd never washed off. Harold, she whispered. Please. I stepped aside. Come in. She followed me to my small kitchen, stood awkwardly until I pointed to a chair. I poured her a glass of water from my Brita pitcher, set it in front of her. She drank it in 3 desperate gulps, hands shaking so much the glass rattled against the table. I sat across from her, perfectly calm, and asked the question I'd been saving. Jessica, do you know why Brandon left me 40% in his will? She stammered through some inadequate answers. I don't know. Because you're his father. He felt obligated. Before I stood and walked to my bedroom closet. From the back shelf, behind old sweaters and boxes of photographs, I pulled out a folder I'd kept there for years. Bank statements from Cayman Islands Bank. I returned to the kitchen, opened the folder, and slid the most recent statement across the table. Jessica looked down. Her eyes went wide. Account balance, $3,247,382. 40 years as a merchant marine captain, I said quietly. The starting salary was $60,000 a year. By the time I retired, I was making $240,000 annually. I invested carefully, lived modestly, never touched the principal. I let that sink in. You called me a beggar, said I couldn't afford a lawyer, said I was just a poor old fool. I smiled without warmth. You were wrong about everything. Jessica was sobbing again, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't know. I thought, I'm so sorry. I let her cry for a minute before speaking again. Here's what you need to understand, Jessica. I didn't fight you for money. I could have lived comfortably without a single dollar from Brandon's estate. I fought you for something more important, Brandon's honor, his memory, his explicit wishes that you violated. I leaned forward. You stole from my dead son. You forged his will. You disrespected everything he built and everything he valued. And you did it because you thought I was weak and poor and powerless. I stood up. You were wrong, and now you know the truth. I had the power to destroy you all along. I just chose to do it legally. She looked up at me, face destroyed by tears. Can you ever forgive me? I considered the question honestly. Maybe someday. Years from now, but not today. Today you need to live with what you did. I walked to the door, opened it. She stood slowly, moving like someone twice her age, and walked past me without another word. I watched her walk down my street toward the bus stop, shoulders hunched, alone. 3 weeks later, we'd face each other one last time in court. The courtroom felt different on the last week of September. Lighter somehow. Maybe it was the morning sun streaming through the high windows, or maybe it was knowing that after 6 months of legal warfare, this was finally the end. Judge Rodriguez entered at 9 sharp, her black robe swishing, her expression businesslike. Jessica stood at the defendant's table with her overwhelmed attorney, looking small and defeated. I stood with Raymond and Nicole, feeling something close to peace. "Let's finish this," the judge said, opening her file. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and legal precedents, this court makes the following determinations. First, Harold Morrison is entitled to $2 million from the estate of Brandon Morrison, representing his 40% share under the legitimate will of 2021. I nodded once, slowly. Second, Jessica Morrison shall pay an additional $500,000 in damages for fraud, emotional distress, and legal fees incurred by Mr. Morrison. Jessica swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. Third, Ms. Morrison is hereby sentenced to 5 years probation for the crime of forgery in the 3rd degree, a lenient sentence given her status as a first-time offender and her cooperation with these proceedings. Her lawyer stood silent, having nothing left to argue. Fourth, the Internal Revenue Service is granted priority claim to $2.1 million from the liquidation of Ms. Morrison's remaining assets, including the Coral Gables property, currently in foreclosure. Before the judge could bang her gavel, Jessica's shaking voice interrupted. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Rodriguez looked surprised, but nodded. Jessica turned to face me directly, tears already streaming. "Harold, Your Honor, everyone here, I want to publicly apologize. I was greedy. I was cruel. I destroyed the memory of a wonderful man, Brandon. He deserved better than me, and Harold deserved better than what I did to him." Her voice cracked. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. But I need you to know that I understand now what I took wasn't just money. It was honor. It was love. It was family." She looked at me. "You showed me that justice exists, that actions have consequences. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The courtroom was silent. Everyone watched me. I stood slowly, feeling Raymond's hand briefly on my shoulder in support. I walked toward Jessica, but stopped several feet away, close enough to speak clearly, far enough to maintain boundary. "Jessica," I said quietly, "I accept your apology. I believe you mean it." I paused. "But forgiveness isn't something I can give you today. Maybe in years to come. Right now, what you need to do is live with the consequences of your choices. Learn from them. Become someone Brandon would have been proud to know." I took a breath. "You dishonored his memory. That's what I can't forgive yet. But I hope someday you'll honor it by being better." I turned and walked back to Raymond and Nicole, leaving Jessica crying at her table. Outside, Miami sunshine hit us like a warm wave. Nicole hugged me so tight I felt my ribs protest, then pulled back with tears in her eyes. "Abuelo, you did it. You really did it." I touched her face gently. "Your father did it, Cario. He wrote that will. He made sure I'd be taken care of. I just made sure his wishes were respected." Raymond shook my hand formally, then pulled me into a brief hug. 40 years I've practiced law," he said. "This might be the most satisfying case I've ever won." We stood there on the courthouse steps, traffic flowing past on Flagler Street, and I felt something release in my chest. The weight of 6 months of fighting finally lifted. Over the next week, I handled the money Brandon had wanted me to have. $500,000 went into an educational trust for Nicole and her future children. She cried when I told her, said it was too much, but I insisted. Brandon would have wanted his daughter taken care of. $300,000 I donated to the Merchant Marine Scholarship Fund in Brandon's name, helping young sailors get their training, honoring the career that had given me everything. The rest, roughly $1.2 million after taxes and fees, went into secure investments for my retirement. I didn't need luxury. I needed security and peace. Jessica, I heard through Warren's final report, moved to a studio apartment in Kendall, got a job at Target and another as a night cleaner, would spend the next 15 years paying off debts. Derek never recovered his real estate career, last spotted working at a car dealership in Homestead. Their greed had cost them everything. 3 days after the final hearing, I was back on my porch in Little Havana. Same routine I'd had for 15 years. Wake at 6, make Cuban coffee, read the newspaper, water the small garden, walk to the corner store for fresh bread. Nothing had changed in my daily life, except that now I had money in the bank I'd never need to touch, security for the rest of my days, and proof that I'd honored my son's wishes. That evening my phone rang. Albert. Harold, you feel like a beer? And I'm grilling chicken. I laughed. Cerveza sounds perfect, amigo. Same friends, same neighborhood, same life, just with justice finally served. I sat on my porch as the sun set over Miami, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. The coffee was strong, the evening was warm, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of children playing in a neighbor's yard. Brandon would have wanted this. Not revenge, not cruelty, but justice. His wishes honored, his memory protected, his daughter secure. I'd been a captain for 40 years, learned to navigate storms and calm seas alike. This had been a storm, fierce and personal, but I'd weathered it the same way I'd weathered everything, with patience, strategy, and the certainty that experience beats arrogance every time. The old sea-wolf had prevailed, not through force, but through law, not through rage, but through resolve. And now, finally, I could rest. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.